The unrealized capital gains tax is essentially a theft of people's work, their energy, their wealth. You might be thinking that the government's never going to step in and take my Bitcoin, but let me just tell you what has just passed in California. And it says, if the bill becomes law, the state can transfer these assets to a state-held wallet. Never leave your Bitcoin or any crypto on an exchange. That is a big no-no. The answer is you've got to do self-custody. If you are someone who has to stay and you have no other alternative, but you also are in fear of Labor's taxes reaching down to you and stealing your wealth, then what can you do? The only thing that I would suggest you do is, I'm Matthew Fraser and this is Crypto Collective. After making millions with Amazon and e-commerce, I realized that if I was starting again today, crypto would be my first choice. I'm here to help you take your first steps and build real wealth. Ready to set yourself up for life? Let's go. Hey guys, welcome to this episode of Crypto Collective. This is going to be so powerful because it's all about how to avoid and pay either zero tax or no tax, especially now as we look right down the barrel of Labor's unrealized capital gains tax. The tax, or the theft is what I call it, the theft of people's retirement savings. And this video that I only did just recently absolutely blew up. The comments went into the stratosphere. I've never had so much engagement on one particular video. So I know this is of huge importance to people, because what we can now see is the tact that Labor are now doing, which is, rather than trying to curb spending, because it's a government spending problem, they're diverting the issue to the everyday folk now. And they're now imposing this unrealized capital gains tax on superannuation above 3 million. Now, to give you an update as to where things are at right now, we've still got Paul Keating. Well, first of all, we've got Albo and Jim Chalmers, who are headstrong in delivering and making sure this particular bit of legislation gets passed. They want people to start paying more tax out of their superannuation. You've still got, though, Paul Keating, the former Treasurer and Prime Minister of Australia, one of the architects of superannuation guarantee. He is still opposing the tax, okay? He's not backing down on it. He thinks it's the most ridiculous, ludicrous tax he's ever seen, which is interesting because Jim Chalmers did his doctorate, or some study at least, on Paul Keating and idolizes the guy. So you think Paul Keating would be able to get into Chalmers' ear and say, hey, mate, this is probably not a good idea. How about we just cut back on this unrealized capital gains tax, because people are furious about it. There's never been an unrealized capital gains tax per se in Australia. So we're really setting the benchmark here. In fact, in most countries, there's a couple of countries that have had it. It's a disaster, but most countries don't even do it. Okay, so we're trying to lead the way. Good on you, Jim. The other people who are opposed to the tax, though, and these are stalwart Labor people. One, Bill Kelty. He's a former Labor minister back in the 90s. He's quoted as saying, a bad policy is simply bad policy, regardless of your wealth, okay? So we support Bill's stance on it. And the other person who's come out in more recent times opposing the tax in its current form would be Labor Senator Sally McManus, who, of course, made lots of headway in her career through the trade union movement, okay? So she's now a Labor Senator. She is opposing this unrealized capital gains tax. Now, not that she's not really looking after, she says she's looking after workers. The reason why she says this is because Labor's tax, the super tax, is not indexed. So it means that the studies also show that people who are in their 20s now, by the time they get to their 60s, they will have well over $3 million in super, and then they will succumb to this theft of their retirement savings as well. Now, Sally is calling for, at the very least, for this tax to be indexed. So over time, the threshold increases, and maybe by the time someone who's in their 20s gets to their 60s, maybe the threshold is increased to $4 or $5 million, and they might avoid this unrealized capital gains tax. I've always said, though, regardless of someone's wealth, it should not be stolen. Because the unrealized capital gains tax is essentially a theft of people's work, their energy, their wealth. This is actually a wealth tax. And you could consider it also an inheritance tax before the person actually passes away, because sometimes, and a lot of parents, a lot of family officers and what have you, want to pass on the wealth that they've accumulated over a period of time to their children. And I think people should have every right to do that. So that's where we're up to from Labor's side of things. They're going full hog into this. But an interesting point, though, is the Greens in past months have said they wanted to lower the threshold from 3 million down to 2 million, which means that more people would be captured into this tax. But in recent days, they've now changed their tact. And now what they're calling for is for the unrealized gains tax to be scrapped altogether, but instead, everyone just pays more tax. So currently within superannuation, you pay a 15% tax. Labor's proposing to move it to 30%, as well as the unrealized capital gains. But the Greens are now saying, let's get rid of the unrealized part and just make everyone move from 15 to 20%, but no threshold. So everybody just has to pay more. So I don't know which ones, okay, I lie. I do know which one would be better, which would be the increase from 15 to 20% and no unrealized capital gains tax. That would be better. But ultimately, I will be calling for no changes whatsoever in its current form, certainly no capital gains tax, unrealized capital gains tax. But I'm going to take it one step further and I'm going to give you of what I would consider the best solution to this superannuation tax of all. And I'm telling you at the very end. So one of the things that's come up is people have been contacting me, asking me, Matthew, how can we avoid paying this unrealized capital gains tax? Which actually makes it a broader question, because this has also come up, is how can we just not pay tax at all? Or how can we at least legally minimize our tax? And the world is very, very small. The information is at our fingertips now, and you can now find so much credible information on how you can minimize your tax. I think previously, minimizing tax through other jurisdictions, nations, offshore companies, offshore bank accounts was kind of a bit of a mystery. You heard about it, but it was reserved for people who had, in today's dollars, billions and billions of dollars. But in fact, now you see a lot of people moving to Bali, Thailand. Funny enough, there's a mass exodus out of other countries, not just Australia, into Bali and Thailand, but there's a mass exodus right now of people in the UK. The people in the UK are leaving by the droves. And in fact, 10,000 people left the UK last year alone. The majority of them went to Dubai. So these are the types of things we're going to start talking about, is what are the options? Where can I go to and basically pay no tax? And how also does it relate to someone who holds Bitcoin, especially if it's in your SMSF? So the first thing is, I'm always thinking about how can I reduce my tax? And if you're not thinking about how can I reduce/minimize your tax, you're crazy, right? Because who wants to pay more? Now, what's interesting though is I've got people in my TikTok account right now, which is still completely blowing up, full of communists and socialists who absolutely love Labor's unrealized tax. And as soon as I've said, hey, let's get rid of that, that you're trying to get rid of it because you don't want to pay your fair share of tax, or you're trying to avoid tax. This is the commentary that these communists and socialists start spouting, is that if you don't want to pay more tax, then somehow you're avoiding tax. The thing is, and I think this is what is really pissing people off right now, is the rules were set in place by Labor and other governments many, many years ago, right? We go all the way back to the 90s. And so people have been, rightly so, putting money away in a reduced tax vehicle, which is superannuation, for their retirement. Because the government at the time said, hey, look, put this away so that you'll have a better retirement and less reliance also on the welfare state, which is obviously in the pension system. And in doing so, the governments actually gave further incentives. They encouraged people to put as much as they possibly could into this superannuation account. Now, fast forward to today, now, and people have warned, actually, people warned back then that this would happen today. And now it's actually happening, which is governments see this huge $4.2 trillion honeypot as something that they can simply reach in and just start taking, not to benefit the citizens, not to benefit the people they represent as far as a retirement status, But because they simply haven't been able to manage the budget, and they've got, as I said earlier before, they've got a cost of a crisis of spending. It's a government spending crisis that we've now got. They simply cannot rein it in because they're so addicted to just shelling out more and more, especially when it comes to public servants, the entitlements that public servants get, and the welfare state. So they're going to keep dishing out this money to keep control of government, right? Because if you're paying people to support you, then of course they're going to vote for you. That's basically how it works. Now, of course, the other thing that we're absolutely pissed off about, if I just want to talk about unrealized capital gains, is the fact that some politicians, bureaucrats, and judges are exempt from the tax. How is that fair? And it makes me so freaking mad. I'm freaking livid about it. So how can we get the hell out of us Dodge, which is basically Australia? And every single day I'm seeing comments from people who are either now considering leaving Australia or have left Australia already to go to other countries that have got more freedoms, less tax, and basically you can keep more of your wealth. This is something that I'm always thinking about. I've got friends who have done exactly the same thing. One in particular, you can go and check out his YouTube channel, Where is Adam Hudson? He actually documents his journey from coming from Australia into, of all places, Cyprus. Now, Cyprus is a really interesting country. I think the tax rate there for companies is about 12%. No tax on dividends, no tax on personal income, no capital gains tax. And you only have to live in Cyprus only 2 months of the year to have a residency or citizenship based in Cyprus. One of the advantages, of course, with Cyprus, as I see from Adam's channel, which is it's only about 2-hour flight from Italy, the UK. You can obviously do a lot of traveling, and its locality to so many great destinations is fantastic. And it has something like the same as the Gold Coast, about 300 plus days of the year, which is sunshine. So how good is that? So that's certainly something that people can think about. Also, Dubai is one where a lot of people are moving to. The difference, of course, with Dubai is you may have to get a particular type of visa. You may have to pay to get a visa. There's one going around right now. It's called the Golden Residency Visa. You could get in at about 50,000 USD. Then on top of that, if you've got spouses or children, about another 1,500 USD for each of those. But to qualify to get into that system, you've got to be someone who's going to add value, particularly in what they call the Web3. You could also say maybe the crypto space. You could also argue that in the creator space, like if you're someone that's got something like this right now, a YouTube channel or a big Instagram following, etc., then you might qualify. And one of the reasons why they would love to have you in the country is so that you can talk about Dubai, and essentially you become the salesperson for Dubai. Now, what are the advantages to Dubai? Well, probably the reason most people are going there is because it has a low tax. Now, it used to be zero tax for basically everything, okay? But in recent years, and this is what I heard yesterday, is the reason why they moved from a zero tax to a 9% corporate tax was because there was a lot of other nations that were kind of a bit dirty. They were like, hey, we're charging our people 30% tax or 25% corporate tax, not to mention Australia, the highest tax rate, 45+%, which is outrageous. They got a lot of pressure from the international community to increase their tax because so many people were now moving and you had what they call a flight of capital, or a capital flight, going to the Dubai. People were taking their money and were like, we're out of here, and ending up in Dubai. And all the other nations like, hey, hang on a second, we need to keep some of that capital. So this was interesting, rather than these other countries lowering their tax rate to encourage people to stay within the territory, they simply went to Dubai and said, hey, can you just increase your tax rate, please? Because at the moment, it's costing us, right? Now, there are ways in which you can minimize your tax in Dubai. One is that there's no income tax on personal income. Hey, just quickly, if you're ready to dive deeper into crypto and Bitcoin and build real wealth, join my free crypto collective community. It's where I share exclusive insights and strategies and live discussions to help you succeed, whether you're a beginner or scaling your portfolio. Click on the link in the description and join us today. Now back to the episode. There's no capital gains tax, which is a huge one, and it's going to be absolutely beneficial for people who are in the crypto space, who are thinking about either trading, because obviously you're buying and selling quite often. So there's going to be either income tax or capital gains tax implied there. But if you're someone right now you've been stacking Bitcoin, maybe it's in your SMSF, like I've got all of my superannuation in an SMSF allocated to Bitcoin. One day you might want to sell that. You may just want to sell that Bitcoin. Now, I'm not saying you should, but let's say in 20 years time, when you get to 65 years old, you might think, you know what, I'm going to sell this. Now, if it's an SMSF, you're going to obviously have tax discounts. But here's the thing though, will there be? This is what people are now thinking. Because Labor is now changing the rules, on the fly, what could there be in another 20 years time? Now let's just say the unrealized capital gains tax comes in, it's above 3 million. But who's to say that in 5 years time, the threshold comes down to 1 million? Who's to say? And who's to say that then the tax rate jumps from, let's say it's 30%. They say, you know what, we really need to pay for this NDIS. We really need to pay for, Centrelink. We really need to pay for the net zero, which is an absolute money pit, right? They won't even got there by then. Net zero is still a pipe dream. They won't have got there. And they will simply say, let's make it now 50% tax. We have to do it. Yeah, it's for the sake of the country. And sadly, there will be people, the socialists and the communists, who are everywhere in Australia now. It's disgusting. They will be cheering. They'll be cheering from the sidelines saying, yes, tax those people who have $1 million, or maybe it'll be tax those people who have got $500,000 in their super, those rich people, and make sure we take from them. That's where this is going. And I think people can see the writing on the wall with this. Although they might not be under the taxation today, right? You may not have over $3 million, but we all know that once something's in, when was the last time we ever saw a government, except for the carbon tax got repealed by Tony Abbott back in about 2013, but except for that, when was the last time we really saw a tax that was repealed? Because we know what happened under the GST when that came in under Howard. There was a bunch of taxes that were supposed to be removed and they weren't. Income tax at the time was reduced in compensation for the GST. But guess what happened? Over the last 25 years, the income tax has increased, right? So it's give and then increase. So people can see the writing on the wall. They know that what the possibilities are with this. And so that's why it's so important to think ahead now, particularly when you're thinking about stacking Bitcoin. Now, that being said, maybe moving out of the country, and look, it's a big deal, I understand. I mean, I just look around my house all the time and think, oh, imagine if I just moved, and I start looking at the stuff I've got. Like, oh, I have to sell that, I have to sell that. Actually, just today, I'm interviewing someone who's just moved from Australia, Brisbane, Australia, to Dubai. And he actually documents selling all of his stuff around the house. So I understand what's going to happen. His name is Daniel Holmes Trading. We should go and check him out. But I'm going to find out from him why he actually moved. So moving is a big deal. I understand that. But maybe if I said to you, how much would you move for? Thinking about the future, would it be a $20 million decision? If I said you could get $20 million upside, maybe you'd want to think about it and actually decide today to make the move. You might be thinking that the government's never going to step in and take my Bitcoin from me. That might be something that you might be thinking about. But let me just tell you what has just passed in California, in this past week. Now, I jumped into Grok and I said, give me the exact details. It says, California's new law on crypto seizure. California has not introduced a new tax on cryptocurrency seizure, but it has passed an assembly bill which allows the state to classify cryptocurrencies in inactive exchange wallets as unclaimed property after, guess how long? Not 30 years, 3 years. That's it. 3 years And it says, if the bill becomes law, the state can transfer these assets to a state-held wallet, holding them in their original form until the owner reclaims them with proper identification. Right? So basically, it's a form of seizure. Now, why would the state think they could do that? Because they want to take from you and then make you jump through the hoops to say how you can possibly get it back. It's a bit like now how when you deposit money into a bank, which obviously generally goes in through most people's pays, right? You then go to the bank and you say, I want to withdraw $10,000 in cash, for example. And then you have to jump through a whole bunch of hoops and questions because they treat you now as if you're performing some sort of criminal activity, right? It's absolutely overreach by banks, but it's not just the banks who are implementing this. It's implemented on behalf of the government. So now what you've got is California about to solidify this legislation into law, which will mean that if you were to hold your Bitcoin in an exchange for a minimum of 3 years and didn't touch it, it could be seized. That is absolutely outrageous. Now, what's the answer here? The first thing is you would never, ever, and I've said this, I always say this, you would never leave your Bitcoin or any crypto on an exchange. That is a big, big no-no. Now, not just because of taxes or seizures like this and government control, but also because the exchange could go bankrupt, belly up. We've seen that with FTX amongst other types of crypto exchanges. And so you could lose it. The answer is you've got to do self-custody. And there's a whole bunch of reasons why you should do self-custody, mainly because it's you taking control of your own assets you become a sovereign bank, right? You essentially become the bank by holding your Bitcoin. And if you're thinking about who can I contact, there's a link in the description. The guys are called The Bitcoin Way. They can help you with the best security, cybersecurity and protection for your Bitcoin now and into the future. They're the exact guys that I use to help me set up my Bitcoin node, set up an air-gapped wallet, my own secure email. And these guys know what they're talking about. So if you want to sleep well at night, knowing that you're protected now and into the future, you can book a free call with them. Just link in the description. So guys, self-custody is the way to go. And what that means is that by you holding your own Bitcoin assets, you can now get up and go to any country you want without any questions. Okay. Now, some have said, now I'm not advocating for this because this would be against the law, but some have said how easy it would be to actually self-custody your Bitcoin in your SMSF. And then if there was a threat of government overreach or government seizure, you could just simply get on a plane and go to another country and take your Bitcoin with you. And that is the power of Bitcoin and self-custody that I think the governments, as we've seen with this unrealized capital gains tax and possibly other future taxes, they're completely against it. They want full control. And that's why you need to take control of your own destiny, your own wealth and protection. Let's just say that you do not want to move out of Australia. That's just not on the cards for you. And I understand why it wouldn't be for many, many people. Either one, you want to stay in Australia because you love this country too much to get out. Sometimes you're forced to though, or two, family, schooling, kids. I understand, right? There's a lot of pressure on people to stay. So if you are someone who has to stay and you have no other alternative, but you also are in fear of Labor's taxes reaching down to you and stealing your wealth, then what can you do? The only thing that I would suggest you do is go and speak to a professional, an accountant, or solicitor, and find out how maybe there's some legal structures that you could set up now to help minimize or mitigate any taxes that could be coming down the pipeline. That would be something that you would definitely be advantageous to do. So guys, there's so much more I could talk about. I guess all the possibilities of where Labor's taxes could end up, including potentially it could lead to, because there are some ideas floating around with Labor right now, which is actually land tax, an ongoing land tax every single year on a family home. This would be absolutely outrageous, but I wouldn't put it past them because right now they're trying to create this divide within Australia between those who have a home, for example, and those who are renting. And if this unrealized capital gains tax gets passed, which could be any day now, then I have a fear that the unrealized capital gains could actually spread to the family home. Now, why would I say that? Is because the way the socialists and the communists see things is that if you hold an asset, you owe it to the state for the fact that it has increased in value and you've benefited from that. So because you've benefited from the fact that it has increased in value, they want to tax the increase. So what does this look like? It could mean you have a house worth today $500,000 over a period of a year. Let's say it goes from $500,000 to $550,000. There's now a $50,000 increase. The government could come in and say, you now need to pay tax to us on that $50,000 increase in the value of your home, even though you haven't sold the home. Right now in Australia, if you sell a home, it's tax-free. But they could say, but you've benefited from the fact that you've owned this asset in this beautiful country, Australia, off the backs of hardworking, everyday people. So therefore, you've got to pay tax. Then you're going to say, well, how am I going to pay the tax? Because let's just say the tax is even 10%, $5,000. Maybe you don't have $5,000 sitting in a bank account just ready to pay out, right? Maybe it's more than that. Maybe it's 20%. Maybe it's $10,000, right? It may get to the point where you don't have the money, and therefore you have to sell the asset to pay for the tax. That's how insidious these types of taxes can be. And that is ultimately where I think Labor and combined with the Greens, because they're radical extremists as well, that's where this could go. So let's hope it doesn't get there. Hopefully they can bring in some other things. Like I just saw just yesterday, Trump has now brought in a tax where there's no tax on overtime. Could you imagine? Imagine if we had a tax like that in Australia, no tax on overtime, maybe no tax on a second job, for example. That would really keep money in your pocket and help pay for the day-to-day things that we all want to pay for right now. Because we all know there's a cost of living crisis going on right now too. So I said in the very beginning, and wrapping up this episode, guys, I said in the beginning that I would put forward a solution of something that I think could be a good thing for all in Australia to do with superannuation and SMSF. And that would be to petition the government for direct change. Now, this is my petition, which I think you're going to absolutely love. Okay, this is it. To the honourable members of the Australian Parliament, we, the undersigned citizens and residents of Australia, call upon the Australian government to implement a 0% tax on superannuation, including Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies held within a self-managed super fund. This bold reform would empower Australians to build wealth for retirement, foster financial innovation, and position Australia as a global leader in the cryptocurrency adoption and economic growth. So guys, that's what I'm doing. I'm putting a petition together directed at the Australian government today. And I'm simply calling for 0% tax on superannuation, including SMSFs, and of course for people like me and many of you out there who hold Bitcoin in your self-managed super fund. So if that's something that you think you'd like to support, please find the link in the description, click on that, sign the petition, and let's get as many as we possibly can to present that to the folks down in Canberra who ultimately should be there to serve our interests. All right, guys. Thanks so much for joining me on this episode of Crypto Collective. I know this is something that people are so passionate about. If you want to find out more information about what I'm doing and helping people get Bitcoin into an SMSF and continuing the discussions about maybe moving overseas or having companies set up or accounts overseas legally, find the other link in my description down there, which is to the online community Crypto Collective. All right, guys, that's it from me. Take care. Thanks for tuning in to Crypto Collective. If you've enjoyed this episode, the best way to show your support is to leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcast or Spotify, and make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you don't miss an episode. You can also find more of me at I'm Matthew Fraser on all social media platforms.